We are going to play one of our favorite jump games, BS or Real Talk. We give you the quotes, you give us the emojis. Let's start with the Rockets. Houston forward PJ Tucker wanted to shut down the noise that James Harden and Chris Paul are at odds, so he told The Athletic, quote, "I'm sick of all this news, it's fake. Everybody, I argue with James and Chris more than Chris and James argue." So, look, he and Chris are longtime friends, right? I do see them going back and forth with each other quite a bit. Is this BS or Real Talk? Oh!
BS.
Okay, Matt Barnes, as someone who knows Chris Paul well, talk to me.
No, I think where there's smoke, there's fire.
Okay.
I think Chris and Daryl are doing a good job of trying to put those fires out. But to me, I'm less on what is said and just reading body language. And you can tell between those two there's been some friction. Who's to blame, who knows? But there's definitely some friction there. And I think everyone's just trying to put that fire out because, like I said earlier, to me, they're a top contender, even with the team the way it is constructed now, to win the title next year. Right. They just continue to run into a dynasty, which was Golden State the last 2 years in the playoffs. But they have arguably one of the best players in the game in James and a good supporting cast. And they're in a good position to win, but I think they need to figure out what's going on over there first. Woosah.
When you have two alpha dogs going at it on the same team, we've seen it work in the past,
right.
But more often than not, when everybody's not on the same page, especially your stars, you're in trouble.
Right.
And when you have a guy like Chris Paul who seems to be on the downslide a little bit, and you have James who is really the guy there, if they're not on the same page, I don't know how it can work.
I mean, look, Chris Paul is aging because he's a human, and I've seen guys do that very gracefully, right? I mean, I don't think we need to be like, oh, Chris Paul, we're writing him off. There are guys who do that in a way where they become more crafty, where they change their game a little bit. But to do that, it's possible he feels he needs to play a style of play that he can't play with James on the court.
Right.
I think he made a huge sacrifice. I think he made a huge sacrifice realizing he was going to James's team the first year, and who's to say they're a hamstring away from possibly going to the finals. But I think.
Can we say that anymore?
Huh?
This is a separate discussion. Can we say that they were a hamstring away the year before of going to the finals if they had the chance, fully healthy, on their floor, facing a Warriors team without KD?
It was a whole different situation. Like, I felt like they really had the upper hand in that particular series 2 years ago.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
I'm just wondering if we can still say that.
So
That's all.
I just think, to me, it's hard to ask James to change anything because he's one of the most prolific scorers we've ever seen in the history of the game. But to me, the next step for that team and him as a whole is to pick and choose his spots. He is so talented knowing that anytime, any place within that 48 minutes, he can get a bucket. Right. We all know that.
Yep.
But to me, if you start getting everyone else warm and getting them touches and then picking and choosing your spots, down the stretch, you're going to be playing against less people. Right now, he's playing against 2.5 guys every time he brings the ball up because they know that he is the money guy.
Right.
If you get PJ going and Eric Gordon and CP gets his thing, Capella's a lob threat, at the end of the game, you're only playing against one guy, maybe 1.5 guys. So to me, the next step in James's game, as amazing as he is picking and choosing his spots.
It's so interesting. Every single player who sits in that seat and comes on the show says that. I'm very curious to see if there's any advice heeded over the next season. Let's talk about Warriors forward Andre Iguodala, because, man, he is making headlines every day on this book tour. Thank you, Iggy, for making our last week before free agency starts so newsworthy. Earlier this week on The Breakfast Club, he spoke about how some players in the league aren't huge fans of Steph Curry. He said, quote, "You know where I see it the most? The hate on Steph. It's across the league, the other players. Some of the older players hate that he came in and took their shine. They hate it." So Iggy says older players hate on Steph. BS or Real Talk?
Real for me.
Ooh, all right, why?
I've seen it. You can feel it from other players in the league, and Matt, you can speak to this as well. When you talk to people about Steph, there's this resentment because he changed the game. I really believe that.
Okay, so why is your sign say 100 then?
No, I believe it. I'm for it. I've always been a fan of him. But go ahead and finish your point, and I'll say mine.
But he has changed the way the game is played.
Yes.
And I think a lot of guys came into the league thinking, I'm going to grind, I'm going to play defense, I am going to play the way I saw growing up. And Steph has shown that there's a whole different style to the game, and when you play that game, you need different pieces to fit around you. And he has made a lot of guys had to either change their own games or they've kind of slid out of the league a little bit with the way things used to be.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, he came in, he's the golden boy. He came in and destroyed record books, won championships, beat LeBron. He's done a lot of things that probably angered other players and other fans. That's why I don't think he gets the respect he deserves as going to be obviously the greatest shooter, but one of the greatest players ever to play the game. And I can see people being bitter from that. Not to mention the little light skin thing, and people have problems with that. And like I said, he's a perfect example of what the NBA needs to be represented as, and people don't like that either. So like most of the time when people are so good or something so perfect, so to speak, people don't like that, and that's exactly what you get with Steph.
This is the category of being on the right or wrong side of history, though, because history is going to remember him as a two-time MVP, the first unanimous MVP, as you say, consensus, greatest shooter the game has ever seen. So that's people might want to get on board. Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.